Maria had always believed that life was like a puzzle with missing pieces. At 22, she felt like she was still searching for those pieces that would make everything click into place. Every morning, she woke up in her tiny studio apartment, looked at herself in the cracked mirror, and whispered the same words her grandmother used to tell her. Mia, good things come to those who work hard and never give up. The alarm clock buzzed at 5 in the morning, just like it had for the past 3 months. Maria rolled out of bed, her body aching from yesterday's double shift at the Grandview Country Club. She had taken this job because it paid better than anything else she could find without a degree. The club was fancy, the kind of place where people drove cars that cost more than most people made in a year. But Maria didn't mind serving the wealthy guests. Every dollar she earned brought her closer to her dream as she got ready for work. Maria's eyes always drifted to the acceptance letter taped to her bathroom mirror. The music therapy program at the local university had accepted her, but the tuition felt like climbing Mount Everest. $12,000 might as well have been $12 million. Still, she had managed to save $3,000 so far, keeping every tip in a coffee can under her bed. Her coworkers thought she was crazy for not spending money on new clothes or nights out, but they didn't understand. Music wasn't just something she enjoyed. It was something she needed. Like breathing, the bus ride to work took 45 minutes through 3 different neighborhoods. Maria always sat by the window, watching the city wake up. She saw other people heading to their jobs, some looking happy, others looking tired like her. Sometimes she wondered what their dreams were, if they had given up on them or were still fighting for them like she was. When Maria first applied at Grandview Country Club, she almost turned around and left. The building looked like a castle, with its perfectly trimmed hedges and marble entrance. The woman who interviewed her, Mrs. Patterson, had looked at Maria's resume with raised eyebrows. No college degree, no fancy restaurant experience, just honest work at a diner downtown. But something about Maria's determination must have impressed her, because she got the job that same day. The work wasn't easy. The members expected perfection, water glasses never empty, silverware spotless, smiles always bright even when feet were screaming with pain. Maria learned quickly that in this world she was invisible unless something went wrong. The guests talked around her like she wasn't there, discussing business deals worth millions while she refilled their coffee cups. But Maria had a secret that none of them knew. Every break, every quiet moment, she would sneak into the music room where the club kept their beautiful grand piano. She would sit at the bench, close her eyes, and let her fingers remember the songs her grandmother had taught her. Classical pieces, jazz standards, even modern songs she had learned by ear. The piano was like an old friend welcoming her back. Each time with its familiar touch, her grandmother, Abuela Rosa, had been the one who first put Maria's tiny fingers on piano keys. Rosa had worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family who let her bring little Maria to work sometimes. While Rosa cleaned, Maria would sit at their piano, copying the sounds she heard on their radio. The family's daughter took expensive lessons, but Maria learned just by watching and listening. Rosa always said Maria had a gift, something special, that couldn't be taught in any classroom. When Rosa passed away 2 years ago, she left Maria her life savings, $800 and a note that said, "Follow your music, Mia. It will lead you home." That money had helped Maria move to the city and find this job. Sometimes when Maria played piano during her breaks, she could almost feel her grandmother sitting beside her, humming along like she used to. The other waitstaff at Grandview were nice enough, but they didn't really understand Maria's situation. Most of them were working part-time while their parents paid for college, or they were married with husbands who had good jobs. Maria was completely on her own, with no safety net except her own determination. She worked every shift offered, took on extra catering events, and even picked up cleaning duties when the regular crew was short-handed 3 months into the job. Maria had proven herself reliable. She showed up early, stayed late, and never complained about difficult customers. Mrs. Patterson had started giving her the better sections of the dining room, which meant better tips. Some nights, Maria would count her earnings and feel a flutter of hope. At this rate, she might have enough money for school in 2 years instead of 3. The music therapy program wasn't just a career choice for Maria, it was her calling. She had seen what music could do for people when she volunteered at a local nursing home. Elderly residents who rarely spoke would light up when she played familiar songs. She watched music bring back memories, ease pain, and create connections between people who felt alone. Maria knew she wanted to spend her life using music to help others heal. On this particular Tuesday morning, as Maria got dressed in her crisp white shirt and black pants, she had no idea that everything was about to change. Mrs. Patterson had called the night before, asking if Maria could work the annual charity gala on Saturday. It was the club's biggest event of the year, and they needed extra staff. The pay would be double time, plus tips from the wealthiest people in the city. Maria had said yes immediately, even though it meant working 7 days straight. The extra money would be a huge boost to her college fund. As she brushed her hair and pinned it back neatly, she imagined what it would feel like to finally start classes, to learn how to turn her love of music into a profession that could change lives. The charity gala was still 5 days away, but Maria was already nervous. She had worked smaller events at the club, but nothing this big. 300 guests, live entertainment, and a $50,000 charity auction. Mrs. Patterson had warned all the staff that everything had to be perfect. Important people would be watching, including city officials and business leaders who could bring more events to the club. As Maria caught the bus to work, she pulled out her phone and looked at the music therapy program's website for the 100th time. She had memorized every course description, every requirement, every opportunity that waited for her. Sometimes she felt silly for dreaming so big, but then she remembered her grandmother's words and her own experiences with music. She knew this was her path, even if she couldn't see exactly how she would get there. The bus pulled up to Grandview's gates, and Maria took a deep breath. Another day, another step closer to her goal. She had no way of knowing that the charity gala would change everything, that her hidden talent would soon be revealed to people who could help make her dreams come true. For now, she was just Maria Rodriguez, the hardworking waitress with a secret gift and an unshakable belief that good things really do come to those who never give up. Saturday evening arrived faster than Maria had expected. She stood outside the Grandview Country Club at 5 o'clock, watching as expensive cars pulled up to the entrance one after another. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and cars she couldn't even name dropped off guests dressed in evening gowns and tailored suits. The men wore watches that probably cost more than Maria made in 6 months, and the women carried purses that sparkled with what looked like real diamonds. Maria smoothed down her uniform one last time before walking through the staff entrance. The back hallways of the club buzzed with activity as caterers rushed around with silver trays, florists made final adjustments to centerpieces, and the event coordinator barked orders into her headset. Everyone moved with purpose, knowing that tonight had to be absolutely perfect. The grand ballroom had been transformed into something magical. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables covered in crisp white linens. Each table held elaborate floral arrangements with roses and orchids that must have cost hundreds of dollars. At the front of the room sat a magnificent black grand piano, polished until it gleamed like a mirror. Maria paused for just a moment to admire it, remembering all those stolen moments during her breaks when she had played the smaller piano in the music room. Mrs. Patterson gathered all the waitstaff for a final briefing. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced with nervous energy as she explained the evening's timeline. Cocktail hour would start at 6, followed by dinner at 7:30, then the charity auction at 9. The event was raising money for the Children's Hospital, and some of the city's most influential people would be attending. She reminded everyone to smile, move quietly, and remember that they represented the club's reputation. As guests began arriving, Maria took her position near the bar area. She had been assigned to the VIP section, which Mrs. Patterson said was both an honor and a huge responsibility. These were the biggest donors, the people who could write checks that would fund the hospital's new wing. Maria watched as they greeted each other with air kisses and firm handshakes, their conversations flowing from business deals to vacation, homes to children attending Ivy League schools. The first hour passed smoothly. Maria refilled champagne glasses, offered hors d'oeuvres from silver trays, and cleared empty plates with practiced efficiency. She had learned to move almost invisibly through these crowds, appearing when needed and disappearing when not. The guests barely seemed to notice her, which was exactly how it should be at an event like this. During a brief lull, Maria found herself near the piano again. A small sign displayed on an easel announced that classical pianist Jonathan Wright would be performing during dinner. Maria had heard of him. He had played with the city's symphony orchestra and was known for his incredible technique. She felt a little thrill knowing she would get to hear him play while she worked. The conversations around her were fascinating, even though she tried not to listen too closely. One table discussed a merger that would create thousands of jobs. Another group debated the best private schools for their teenagers. A woman in a stunning red dress talked about her recent trip to Paris, where she had bought paintings from an artist whose work was displayed in museums. These people lived in a completely different world from Maria's, but tonight she got to peek inside it. As the evening progressed, Maria noticed that the guests were genuinely excited about the charity auction. This wasn't just a social event. For them, they really cared about helping the children's hospital. She overheard stories about family members who had been treated there, about the amazing doctors and nurses who worked miracles every day. It made her feel proud to be part of an event that would make such a difference. The dinner service began right on schedule. Maria and the other servers moved through the ballroom with military precision, delivering perfectly prepared meals to each table. The head chef had outdone himself with dishes that looked like works of art. Guests complimented everything from the perfectly seasoned soup to the tender filet mignon. Maria smiled to herself, knowing that all their hard work was paying off, but as 8 o'clock approached, something felt wrong. The piano bench remained empty, and there was no sign of Jonathan Wright. Maria watched Mrs. Patterson check her watch repeatedly and whisper urgently into her headset. The event coordinator looked increasingly worried as she made phone call after phone call. Stepping outside the ballroom to avoid alarming the guests, the dinner courses continued without musical accompaniment. But Maria could sense that people were starting to notice. A few guests glanced toward the silent piano, and she heard someone ask when the entertainment would begin. The charity auction was supposed to start with a special musical presentation, and the schedule was already running behind. Maria felt her heart rate increase as she realized something had gone seriously wrong. During her years of working in restaurants, she had seen enough kitchen disasters and last-minute cancellations to recognize the signs of a brewing crisis. The staff were trying to maintain their professional composure, but there was definitely panic behind the scenes. As she cleared plates from one of the VIP tables, Maria overheard a conversation that confirmed her suspicions. The table's host, a distinguished gentleman who served on the hospital's board of directors, was quietly asking Mrs. Patterson about the delayed entertainment. Mrs. Patterson assured him that everything was fine, but Maria could see the worry. In her eyes, the beautiful grand piano sat there like a sleeping giant waiting for someone to bring it to life. Maria found herself staring at it more and more frequently as she moved around the room. She knew every inch of that piano from her secret practice sessions. She knew how the keys felt under her fingers, how the pedals responded to pressure, how the whole instrument sang when played with love and skill. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, surrounded by people who could afford the best music teachers in the world, serving them while a perfectly good piano sat silent just a few feet away. She had spent countless hours learning to play, pouring her heart into music that nobody had ever heard except for a few nursing home residents and her late grandmother's spirit. By 8:15, the tension in the room was becoming noticeable to the guests. The auction was supposed to begin soon, and the evening's entertainment was a crucial part of getting people excited to bid generously. Maria watched Mrs. Patterson make another desperate phone call, her face growing paler with each passing minute. As Maria carried another tray of empty glasses toward the kitchen, she made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find out exactly what had happened to the pianist, and maybe, just maybe, she might be able to help. After all, what was the worst that could happen? They could say no, and things would continue exactly as they were. But if there was even a small chance that her musical skills could save the evening, didn't she owe it to everyone, the guests, the hospital, and herself, to at least try? Maria's hands trembled slightly as she set down her tray of empty glasses and made her way toward the kitchen. She had to know what was happening. The silence from the piano was becoming more obvious by the minute, and she could see guests starting to check their phones and whisper among themselves. This was supposed to be the highlight of their social calendar. And something was clearly going wrong. In the kitchen, chaos was brewing beneath the surface. The head chef was trying to keep his team focused on dessert preparation, but everyone kept glancing toward the swinging doors that led to the ballroom. Maria spotted Mrs. Patterson near the service station, her phone pressed to her ear and her face pale with worry. The event coordinator stood beside her, frantically typing on her tablet while occasionally shaking her head in frustration. Maria took a deep breath and approached them. She had never directly inserted herself into management business before, but tonight felt different. Something told her that this moment might be important, not just for the event but for her own life. As she got closer, she could hear fragments of Mrs. Patterson's conversation. "I understand he's in the emergency room, but surely there must be someone else available," Mrs. Patterson was saying into her phone. "This is the Grandview Country Club's annual charity gala. We have 300 guests expecting entertainment, and the auction starts in 20 minutes. The person on the other end must have given her bad news, because Mrs. Patterson's shoulders sagged with defeat. She hung up and turned to the event coordinator with desperation in her eyes. That was the fourth agency. Everyone is either already booked tonight or too far away to get here in time. We're completely out of options. The event coordinator looked like she might cry. What are we going to tell the board members? They specifically requested live music for the auction. Half of these people flew in from other cities just for tonight. The hospital is counting on us to raise at least $200,000. Maria felt her stomach drop. $200,000 for sick children, and it might fail because there was no music. She thought about all the kids she had met during her volunteer work at the local nursing home, how their faces lit up when she played piano for them. Music had a way of opening people's hearts and making them feel generous. Without it, the auction might not reach its goal. What exactly happened to the pianist? Maria found herself asking before she could stop herself. Both women turned to look at her with surprise. Mrs. Patterson seemed confused about why a waitress was asking about their crisis, but she was too stressed to be annoyed. Jonathan Wright came down with severe food poisoning around noon. He's been vomiting for hours and can barely stand up, let alone perform. His agent has been calling every pianist in the city, but it's Saturday night. Everyone good enough for an event like this is already performing somewhere else. The event coordinator added, "We need someone who can play classical music. Jazz standards, maybe some contemporary pieces that will get people excited about bidding. It's not just background music. This person needs to entertain 300 very sophisticated guests who are used to the best of everything." Maria's heart started beating faster. She knew she could play all of those types of music. During her secret practice sessions on the club's piano, she had worked through classical pieces by Mozart and Chopin, jazz standards like Autumn Leaves, and Fly Me to the Moon, and contemporary songs she had learned by ear. But could she really perform for people like this? People who probably went to the symphony regularly and knew good music when they heard it? How long would the performance need to be? Maria heard herself asking. Mrs. Patterson looked at her strangely. About 45 minutes total. 15 minutes of background music while guests finished dessert, then 30 minutes during the auction to keep energy high and encourage bidding. But why are you asking? Do you know someone who might be available? This was it. This was the moment Maria had to decide whether to take the biggest risk of her life or play it safe and watch the evening fall apart. She thought about her grandmother, who had always told her that opportunities don't knock twice. She thought about the children in the hospital who needed the money this auction would raise. She thought about all those hours she had spent practicing. Alone, dreaming of the day when her music might actually matter to someone. "I can play piano," Maria said quietly. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Mrs. Patterson and the event coordinator stared at her, as if she had just spoken a foreign language. Finally, Mrs. Patterson found her voice. "I'm sorry." "What did you say?" "I said I can play piano. I've been playing since I was 5 years old. I know classical pieces, jazz standards, and contemporary music. I've been practicing on the piano in your music room during my breaks." Maria's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I know it sounds crazy, but I really can do this." The event coordinator looked skeptical. "Maria, this isn't like playing at a coffee shop open mic night. These are very important people who expect professional level entertainment. No offense, but you're a waitress? Do you have any formal training? Have you ever performed for an audience this size?" Maria felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't back down. "I had classical training for 8 years when I was younger. I've been accepted to the university's music therapy program. I play for residents at Sunset Manor nursing home every weekend. I know I'm just a waitress to you, but music is my life. It's what I'm going to school for." Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing their options. Through the kitchen doors, they could hear the murmur of conversation from the ballroom growing slightly louder. Guests were definitely noticing that something was wrong. The auction was supposed to start in 15 minutes, and they had no entertainment lined up. "Even if you could play well enough," Mrs. Patterson said slowly, "you don't have the right clothes. The performer needs to look professional, elegant. You can't play in your waitress uniform." "I have a black dress in my car," Maria said quickly. "I brought it to change into after work tonight. I was planning to go to my friend's birthday party later. It's not fancy, but it's appropriate." The event coordinator checked her watch nervously. "We're running out of time. The board president keeps asking me when the music will start. If we don't have something soon, people are going to start leaving early, and the auction will be a disaster." Mrs. Patterson looked back and forth between Maria and the ballroom doors. The weight of the entire evening's success rested on her shoulders. 300 guests, board members flying in from across the country, a children's hospital counting on the money they would raise tonight. It all came down to trusting a 22-year-old waitress who claimed she could save the day. "If I let you try this," Mrs. Patterson said finally, "and it goes badly, we're all finished. The club's reputation, my job, the hospital's fundraising. Everything is on the line." Maria met her eyes steadily. "I understand. But if I don't try and the evening fails anyway, you'll always wonder if I could have helped. Give me 5 minutes at that piano, and you'll know if I can do this." The decision hung in the air like a musical note waiting to resolve. The moment stretched between them like a tightrope. Maria could see Mrs. Patterson's mind racing, calculating risks and possibilities. Behind them, the kitchen staff continued their work, but Maria noticed several of them had slowed down to listen. Word was spreading quickly among the servers that something big was happening. 5 minutes, Mrs. Patterson said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But not in the ballroom. I can't have guests seeing you test out on their piano. There's another piano in the small event room upstairs. If you can convince me in 5 minutes that you're not going to embarrass us all, then we'll talk about letting you try." Maria's heart jumped into her throat. This was really happening. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "You better not," the event coordinator muttered, checking her watch again. "Because if this doesn't work, we're going to have to tell 300 very important people that there's no entertainment tonight, and the charity auction might have to be canceled." Maria practically ran to the staff parking lot to get her dress. Her hands shook as she unlocked her beat-up Honda and grabbed the garment bag from the back seat. The black dress had cost her a week's worth of tips, but she had bought it for special occasions. She never imagined it would be for something. This important dot in the staff changing room, Maria transformed herself as quickly as possible. The dress fit perfectly, hitting just below her knees with 3/4 sleeves that would allow her arms to move freely at the piano. She had a small pair of pearl earrings that her grandmother had left her, and she put them on for luck. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. For the first time in months, she didn't look like a waitress. She looked like someone who belonged at an elegant event. The small event room was on the second floor, away from the main ballroom. As Maria climbed the stairs, she could hear the murmur of conversation and the clink of silverware from below. The guests were finishing their dessert course, which meant the auction was supposed to start in less than 10 minutes. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Even if she didn't know it, Mrs. Patterson and the event coordinator were already waiting when Maria entered the room. The piano was smaller than the grand piano downstairs, but it was still beautiful. Maria sat down at the bench and immediately felt more confident. This was her element, her safe space. No matter how nervous she felt, the piano always welcomed her home. "What would you like me to play?" Maria asked, her fingers hovering over the keys. "Something classical first," Mrs. Patterson said, crossing her arms. "These people know music. If you're not good enough, they'll notice immediately." Maria closed her eyes for just a moment, thinking of her grandmother. Then she began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of the most beautiful and challenging pieces she knew. From the first note, something magical happened in the room. The piano sang under her touch, each phrase flowing into the next with perfect timing and expression. She had played this piece hundreds of times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, it mattered. When she finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Mrs. Patterson's mouth was slightly open, and the event coordinator had stopped checking her watch. Maria waited, her heart pounding, for someone to say something. "That was ... Mrs. Patterson started, then stopped. "That was beautiful, really beautiful. Where did you learn to play like that?" "My grandmother started teaching me when I was little. Then I had lessons until I was 13, when my family couldn't afford them anymore. But I kept practicing on my own, learning from videos and sheet music I found online." Maria's voice was steady now, filled with quiet pride. "Music has always been the most important thing in my life." "Play something jazz," the event coordinator said, but her tone had changed completely. She was no longer skeptical. She was hopeful. Maria transitioned smoothly into Autumn Leaves, a jazz standard that allowed her to show off her improvisation skills. She played the melody straight through once, then began to explore variations, her fingers dancing over the keys with confidence and creativity. The song transformed under her touch, becoming something both familiar and completely new. "Okay, one more," Mrs. Patterson said, and Maria could hear the excitement building in her voice. "Something contemporary, something that might get people excited about spending money." Maria smiled and launched into a beautiful arrangement of "A Thousand Years," a modern song that had become popular at weddings and special events. She had learned it by ear after hearing it on the radio, and had spent weeks perfecting an arrangement that was both elegant and emotionally powerful. As she played, she could see both women relaxing, their worry being replaced by something that looked like relief. When the song ended, Mrs. Patterson was already reaching for her phone. "I need to call the board president immediately. Maria, you're going to save this entire evening." But Maria held up her hand. "Wait, before we do this, I need to tell you something. I've never performed for an audience this big or this important. I've played at nursing homes and small events, but nothing like this. I'm not lying about my abilities, but I need you to know that I'm scared too." The honesty in her voice seemed to touch something in Mrs. Patterson. "You know what? That makes me trust you more, not less. A professional performer might be arrogant or demanding. You care about doing well because this matters to you." "It does matter to me," Maria said quietly. "Not just because of my job, but because of what this money will do for sick children. I've seen what music can do for people who are hurting. If my playing can help raise money for the hospital, then this is the most important performance of my life." The event coordinator was already making notes on her tablet. "We'll need to introduce you somehow. The guests will be surprised to see someone they don't recognize." "Keep it simple," Mrs. Patterson decided. "Just say there's been a last-minute change and we have a special surprise performer. Don't over-explain. Let her music speak for itself." Maria, stood up from the piano bench, smoothing down her dress. In less than 5 minutes, she would walk into that ballroom and either achieve something amazing or fail spectacularly in front of 300 people. There was no middle ground. "Are you ready for this?" Mrs. Patterson asked, Maria thought. About her grandmother, about the acceptance letter taped to her bathroom mirror, about all the children who would benefit from tonight's donations. She thought about every hour she had spent practicing alone, dreaming of a moment when her music might really matter. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm ready." As they walked back toward the ballroom, Maria could hear the sound of conversation and laughter. Growing louder, in just a few minutes, all of that would stop. All eyes would be on her, judging whether a young waitress had any business sitting at such an elegant piano. But for the first time in her life, Maria felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Maria stood outside the ballroom doors, her hand resting on the golden handle. Through the small window, she could see the elegant crowd finishing their dessert, wine glasses catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. These were people who attended the symphony, who had season tickets to the opera, who probably had grand pianos in their own homes. And here she was, about to walk in there and play for them. Mrs. Patterson appeared beside her, straightening her jacket nervously. "The board president just asked me again about the entertainment. I told him we have a wonderful surprise planned." She looked at Maria with a mixture of hope and terror. "This is it. Once we announce you, there's no going back." "I know," Maria whispered, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. Inside, her heart was racing like a hummingbird's wings, but something deeper was keeping her steady. Maybe it was all those years of practicing alone, or maybe it was the memory of her grandmother's encouraging words. Either way, she felt ready. The event coordinator appeared with a wireless microphone. "I'm going to keep the introduction very brief. Just say we have a special musical guest and let your playing do the talking. The less explanation, the better." Maria nodded, watching as the woman walked to the front of the ballroom. The conversations gradually quieted as guests noticed someone preparing to make an announcement. Maria could see curious faces turning toward the front, expecting to see a well-known performer take the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the coordinator's voice carried clearly through the room, "we have a wonderful surprise for you this evening. Please join me in welcoming our special musical guest for tonight's charity auction." That was her cue. Maria pushed open the doors and walked into the ballroom, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly quiet room. She kept her eyes focused on the grand piano, trying not to look at the hundreds of faces that were now staring at her with confusion and curiosity. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever, but it was probably only 20 seconds. As she approached the bench, she could hear whispers starting around the room. She caught fragments of conversation. "Who is that? I don't recognize her. She's very young. Wasn't Jonathan Wright supposed to play tonight?" Maria sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. Her hands found their position on the keys, and suddenly the familiar touch grounded her. This was just like all those practice sessions, except now people were watching. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for just a moment, and began to play. She started with something gentle and beautiful, Debussy's Clair de Lune. It was a piece that always made people stop and listen, something that would capture attention without being too bold. From the very first notes, something magical happened in the room. The whispers stopped completely. The clinking of silverware ceased. Even the waitstaff who were clearing tables slowed their movements to listen. Maria lost herself in the music, her fingers moving across the keys with practiced grace. She had played this piece so many times that her hands knew exactly where to go, allowing her mind to focus on the emotion and expression. Each phrase flowed into the next like water, creating a spell that seemed to hold the entire room captive. When the piece ended, there was absolute silence for a moment. Then slowly applause began. It started with a few people and quickly spread throughout the ballroom until everyone was clapping. Maria opened her eyes and saw faces that were no longer confused or skeptical. They looked impressed, even amazed, but she wasn't done yet. The auction needed energy and excitement, not just beauty. Maria transitioned smoothly into a jazz arrangement of Fly Me to the Moon, her fingers dancing over the keys with newfound confidence. This was her chance to show these people what she could really do. The jazz piece allowed her to showcase her technical skills and creativity. She played the melody straight through once, then began to improvise, adding her own flourishes and variations. The music swung and soared, filling every corner of the grand ballroom with sophisticated rhythms and harmonies. She could see people nodding along to the beat, some even tapping their feet under the table from her position at the piano. Maria could see the guests' faces more clearly now. The skepticism was gone, replaced by genuine appreciation and enjoyment. An elderly woman at the front table had tears in her eyes. A businessman who had been checking his phone earlier was now completely focused on the music. Children who had been fidgeting in their seats were sitting still, mesmerized by the sounds flowing from the piano. Mrs. Patterson stood near the back of the room, her face beaming with relief and pride. She caught Maria's eye and gave her a small nod of encouragement. The event coordinator was already preparing for the auction, her earlier panic replaced by confident excitement. As Maria finished the jazz piece, the applause was even stronger than before. She could hear people calling out compliments. Wonderful! Absolutely beautiful! Where has she been hiding? The energy in the room had completely shifted. What had started as polite curiosity was now genuine enthusiasm, but Maria saved the best for last. She had been thinking about what piece would really get people excited about opening their wallets for charity, and she knew exactly what to play. She launched into an uplifting, contemporary arrangement of What a Wonderful World, but with her own special touches that made it sound both familiar and completely fresh. This piece was different from the others. It wasn't just technically impressive or beautiful, it was hopeful and inspiring. As she played, Maria thought about the children in the hospital who would benefit from tonight's donations. She thought about the doctors and nurses working miracles every day. She poured all of that emotion into her playing, making the music. Tell a story about hope and healing and the power of people coming together to help others. The room was completely transformed. People were no longer just listening politely. They were emotionally invested in what they were hearing. Maria could see it in their faces, the way they leaned forward, the way some people reached for their partner's hand. The music was doing what she had always believed it could do. It was touching hearts and opening minds. When she finished the piece, the applause was thunderous. People stood up from their tables, giving her a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Maria felt tears stinging her eyes as she looked out at all those faces. Seeing respect and appreciation where there had once been doubt, the board president, a distinguished man in his 70s, approached the piano with a huge smile on his face. "Young lady," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "that was absolutely extraordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that we've witnessed something very special tonight." The crowd erupted in applause again, and Maria felt like she was living in a dream. 20 minutes ago, she had been a nervous waitress, afraid she might embarrass herself. Now, she was standing at the piano, receiving a standing ovation from some of the most sophisticated people in the city, but the best part was still to come. The auction was about to begin, and Maria could feel the excitement and generosity in the room. Her music had done exactly what she had hoped. It had opened hearts and created the perfect atmosphere for people to give generously to help sick children. She had proven herself in the most spectacular way possible, and her life would never be the same. The standing ovation seemed to last forever, but Maria didn't want it to end. She had never experienced anything like this in her entire life. 300 people were on their feet, clapping enthusiastically, and some were even wiping tears from their eyes. The elderly woman at the front table was crying openly now, pressing a handkerchief to her cheek while she applauded. Maria stood up from the piano bench and gave a small bow, the way she had seen performers do in videos online. Her legs felt shaky, but not from nerves anymore. This was the shakiness that comes from pure adrenaline and joy. She had done it. She had actually done it. A girl from a tiny apartment who worked double shifts to save money for college had just given the performance of her life to some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the city. The board president was still standing near the piano, beaming like a proud grandfather. He raised his hand to quiet the applause, and gradually the room settled back into their seats. But the energy was completely different now. Where there had been polite sophistication before, now there was genuine warmth and excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," the board president announced, his voice carrying easily through the now quiet ballroom, "I think we can all agree that we have just witnessed something truly magical. Before we begin our charity auction, I'd like to know more about this remarkable young woman who has graced us with her extraordinary talent." Maria felt her cheeks flush red. She hadn't expected to have to speak to the crowd. Playing piano was one thing, but addressing 300 important people was something entirely different. The board president gestured for her to come closer to where he stood. "Please tell us your name and a little about yourself," he encouraged, his kind eyes making her feel slightly less nervous. Maria took a small step forward, her voice quiet at first. "My name is Maria Rodriguez. I work here at the Grandview Country Club as a waitress." She paused as murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. She could see people looking at each other with amazement, clearly not having expected this revelation. "I've been playing piano since I was 5 years old," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "My grandmother taught me my first songs, and then I had lessons until my family couldn't afford them anymore. But I never stopped playing and practicing because music isn't just something I do, it's who I am." The room was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Maria looked out at all those faces and saw something she hadn't expected: genuine interest and compassion. These weren't just wealthy people looking down on a waitress anymore. They were human beings connecting with another human being through the universal language of music. "I'm actually here working tonight to earn money for college," Maria continued. "I've been accepted to the music therapy program at the university. I want to use music to help people heal, especially children who are sick or hurting. That's why tonight's charity auction means so much to me personally. I've seen what music can do for people who are struggling, and I know how important the work at the Children's Hospital is." When she finished speaking, the applause started again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just appreciation for her musical talent. It was respect for her as a person, for her dreams and her determination. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized that these people weren't just clapping for her performance. They were clapping for her story, for her courage, for the reminder that extraordinary talent and beautiful dreams can come from the most unexpected places. The board president placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Maria, your story is as beautiful as your music, and I have a feeling that tonight is going to be very special for the Children's Hospital. Thanks in large part to the inspiration you've provided us all." He turned back to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our charity auction, let's remember what we've just experienced. We've been reminded that talent, determination, and dreams are not limited by circumstances. Maria has shown us the power of music to touch hearts and bring people together. Now let's open our hearts and our wallets to help the children who need our support." The auction began immediately, and Maria could sense something magical happening in the room. The energy was electric, charged with emotion and generosity. The first item up for bid was a week-long vacation to a luxury resort in Hawaii with a starting bid of $5,000. Within minutes, the bidding had escalated to $15,000, far higher than anyone had expected. Maria was asked to continue playing background music during the auction, and she was happy to oblige. She chose pieces that were uplifting and inspiring, creating a soundtrack that seemed to encourage people to bid generously. As she played, she watched the auction unfold with amazement. Item after item sold for amounts that far exceeded their estimated values. A private dinner with the city's celebrity chef went for $8,000. A piece of artwork donated by a local gallery sold for $12,000. Even smaller items like weekend getaways and restaurant gift certificates were selling for double or triple their usual auction prices. But it wasn't just the money that amazed Maria. It was the spirit in the room. People were laughing, cheering for each other's bids, and celebrating every successful sale. The earlier formality had been replaced by genuine enthusiasm and community spirit. Maria's music had somehow broken down the usual barriers and reminded everyone why they were there. The highlight of the auction came when they announced a special spontaneous addition to the evening's offerings. The board president returned to the microphone with a twinkle in his eye. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more very special item to auction tonight. After witnessing Maria's incredible talent, several of our board members have come together to create a scholarship fund. We are auctioning the opportunity to contribute to Maria's education, helping her achieve her dream of becoming a music therapist so she can use her gift to help heal children. Maria's hands froze on the piano keys. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. These people, who had been complete strangers an hour ago, were creating a scholarship fund for her. She looked out at the crowd and saw nodding heads and encouraging smiles. The elderly woman who had been crying earlier was already raising her hand to bid. "The bidding will start at $1,000, the auctioneer announced, "for the privilege of contributing to this young woman's education and helping her dreams come true." "5,000, someone called out immediately. 10,000 came. Another voice from across the room. 15,000. The bidding continued to escalate, but Maria realized that this wasn't really about competition anymore. People weren't trying to outbid each other. They were trying to out-donate each other. They were using the auction format as an excuse to give as much money as possible to help her achieve her dreams. As the numbers climbed higher and higher, Maria felt overwhelmed by the generosity and kindness of these strangers who had become believers in her potential. Her hands trembled as she realized that her life was changing right before her eyes, one bid at a time. The bidding for Maria's scholarship fund had reached $25,000, and it showed no signs of slowing down. Maria sat at the piano, her hands resting motionless on the keys, watching in complete disbelief as strangers competed to change her life. Every time she thought the bidding was over, another hand shot up from somewhere in the crowd. 30,000, called out a woman in a sparkling silver dress near the back of the room. 35,000, responded a gentleman at one of the front tables. Raising his paddle with enthusiasm, Maria felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Just a few hours ago, she had been worried about having enough money to cover her rent next month. Now people were bidding amounts that were more than twice her annual salary, just to help her go to college. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart beating so fast she was afraid it might burst. The elderly woman who had been crying during Maria's performance suddenly stood up from her table. The room quieted as she raised her hand, not to bid but to speak. The auctioneer paused, recognizing that something important was about to happen. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice wavering with emotion but carrying clearly through the ballroom. "My name is Dorothy Chun, and I'd like to say something before this bidding continues." The room fell completely silent. Maria could see that Mrs. Chun was someone who commanded respect. Other guests were turning in their chairs to give her their full attention. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair perfectly styled and jewelry that caught the light from the chandeliers. 50 years ago, Mrs. Chun began, I was a young woman with big dreams and very little money. I wanted to become a teacher, but my family couldn't afford to send me to college. I worked 3 jobs to save enough money, and it took me 7 years to get my degree. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. I know what it's like to have people doubt you because of where you come from or what job you do to survive. Maria felt tears starting to form in her eyes. This elegant, wealthy woman had once been like her, young, struggling, and full of dreams that seemed impossible to reach. Tonight, this beautiful young lady reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place, Mrs. Chun continued. She reminded me that talent and determination are more valuable than any amount of money. But she also reminded me that sometimes people with money have the power to help dreams come true. The room was so quiet that Maria could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning system. Everyone was hanging on Mrs. Chun's every word. So I'm not going to bid against all of you wonderful people, Mrs. Chun announced. Instead, I'm going to make a different kind of contribution. I would like to donate $50,000 to Maria's education fund, and I challenge everyone in this room to match that spirit of generosity in whatever way they can. The ballroom erupted. People leaped to their feet, applauding wildly. Maria covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. $50,000. That was more than enough to cover her entire degree program, with money left over for living expenses. But Mrs. Chun wasn't finished. As the applause died down, she continued speaking. Maria, would you mind playing one more song for us? Something that represents hope and new beginnings? Maria wiped the tears from her eyes and nodded. She knew exactly what to play. Her fingers found the keys, and she began a gentle, heartfelt arrangement of Over the Rainbow. It was a song about dreams coming true, about finding hope beyond difficult circumstances. As she played, she thought about her grandmother, who would have been so proud to see this moment. The music seemed to cast a spell over the room once again. But this time, something even more magical began to happen. Other people started standing up, one by one, making their own announcements. A businessman near the middle of the room stood up. I'd like to contribute $10,000 to the scholarship fund, he announced. And I'd also like to offer Maria a part-time job at my company's music therapy program so she can gain experience while she studies. A woman at another table rose. My husband and I would like to donate $15,000. And we'd like to offer Maria the use of our lake house for study retreats and relaxation during her college years. The contributions kept coming. Some people offered money, others offered internships, mentoring, or other forms of support. A local music store owner offered free instruments and sheet music. A recording studio owner offered free studio time to help Maria create a portfolio of her work. Maria realized that what was happening went far beyond money. These people were creating an entire support network around her dreams. They weren't just funding her education. They were investing in her future as a music therapist, making sure she would have every opportunity to succeed. The board president finally took the microphone again, his own eyes misty with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, in my 30 years of organizing charity events, I have never seen anything like what we've witnessed tonight. Not only have we raised over $300,000 for the Children's Hospital, a new record, but we've also come together to change one young woman's life forever. He turned to Maria, who was still sitting at the piano in a state of shock. Maria, by my count, the contributions for your education and future have reached well over $100,000, plus numerous other offers of support and opportunity. You came here tonight as a waitress, but you're leaving as something much more. You're leaving as proof that dreams really do come true when talent meets opportunity and generous hearts. The applause was deafening. People were crying openly now, including Maria herself. She stood up from the piano bench and tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Thank you, she managed to say, her words choked with emotion. I don't know how to thank you all enough. A few hours ago, I was worried about how I was going to afford college. Now, not only can I go to school, but I have a whole community of people who believe in my dreams. She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks. I promise you that I will use every opportunity you've given me to help heal children with music. I will make sure that your generosity creates a ripple effect that helps many, many other people. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Maria found herself surrounded by new friends and mentors. People were giving her business cards, phone numbers, and invitations to lunch meetings. Mrs. Chun approached her with a warm hug and whispered, Remember, dear, tonight isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning. Maria nodded, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. She knew that her life had been completely transformed in a single evening, but she also knew that the real work was just starting. She had been given an incredible gift, and now she had the responsibility to use it wisely. As she finally changed back into her uniform to help with the cleanup, Maria smiled through her tears. Tomorrow she would still be Maria Rodriguez, the waitress who worked at Grandview Country Club, but she would also be Maria Rodriguez, the future music therapist, with a community of supporters behind her and unlimited possibilities ahead. 6 months later, Maria walked through the halls of the university's music therapy building, her arms full of textbooks and sheet music. The familiar weight of her backpack and the sound of practice rooms filled with piano melodies felt like home. Every morning when she woke up in her small but comfortable dorm room, she still couldn't quite believe this was her real life. The scholarship money had covered not just her tuition, but also her room and board, books, and even a small monthly allowance for personal expenses. Mrs. Chun had been true to her word, checking in with Maria regularly and offering guidance whenever she needed it. The elderly woman had become like a grandmother to her, sharing stories about her own journey and reminding Maria that success came with the responsibility to help others. Maria's grades were excellent, but more importantly, she was thriving in ways she had never imagined possible. Her professors were impressed not just with her musical abilities, but with her deep understanding of how music could heal. Her own experiences had given her insights that couldn't be taught from textbooks. She understood what it felt like to struggle, to feel invisible, to have dreams that seemed impossible. That understanding made her incredibly effective when working with patients. The part-time job at the music therapy clinic had exceeded all her expectations. 3 days a week she worked with children at the city's main hospital using music to help them cope with illness, pain, and fear. The kids loved her instantly, drawn to her genuine warmth and her ability to meet them exactly where they were. Whether she was helping a 6-year-old sing through a painful medical procedure, or teaching a teenager to express his anger through drumming, Maria felt like she was exactly where she belonged. But the biggest surprise had come just 2 months after that magical night at the charity gala. Mrs. Patterson had called Maria into her office at the Grandview Country Club with an unexpected offer. The club wanted to hire her as their official pianist for special events and dinner service on weekends. The pay was 3 times what she had made as a waitress, and the schedule would work perfectly with her college classes. "We've had dozens of requests for you specifically," Mrs. Patterson had explained with a smile. "Word has spread about that night. And now every event planner in the city wants the young woman who made the charity gala so memorable. You've become something of a local celebrity." Maria had accepted the position, but she insisted on one condition: she would continue working as a waitress during busy periods, because she never wanted to forget where she came from or lose touch with the hardworking staff who had become like family to her. The transformation in how people treated her was remarkable, but it also taught her important lessons about human nature. The same guests who had barely noticed her when she was serving their dinner now sought her out for conversation, asking about her studies and sharing their own stories. She realized that their earlier dismissal hadn't necessarily been about cruelty. It was about the invisible barriers that society creates between different types of people. Her music had broken down those barriers, reminding everyone that every person has a story worth hearing. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Maria was heading to her favorite place on campus, the small practice room where she prepared for her work with patients. But today was special. She was getting ready for her most challenging case yet, a 7-year-old girl named Lily who had been in the hospital for 3 months with a serious illness and had barely spoken since her arrival. The doctors and nurses had tried everything to reach Lily, but the little girl remained withdrawn and silent. Her parents were desperate, and the medical team hoped that music therapy might be the key to helping her begin to heal emotionally as well as physically. Maria had spent weeks preparing for this session, researching Lily's condition and planning an approach that might help the child feel safe enough to open up. As Maria practiced gentle lullabies and simple songs that might appeal to a frightened child, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. That night at the charity gala had changed everything, but not just because of the money. It had shown her that when people witness authentic passion and genuine talent, they respond with generosity and support that goes far beyond what anyone could expect. The scholarship fund that began that night had grown into something much larger. Mrs. Chun and several other donors had worked with the university to establish a permanent program that would help other young people from working class backgrounds pursue degrees in music therapy. Maria had been asked to serve on the selection committee, helping to identify students who had both the talent and the heart to succeed in the field. Maria's story had also been featured in the local newspaper, and she had received letters from young people all over the region who were inspired by her example. Many of them shared their own dreams and struggles, asking for advice about pursuing careers in music. Maria tried to respond to each letter personally, remembering how much it would have meant to her to have someone believe in her dreams when she was younger. The recording studio owner who had offered her free studio time had become a mentor and friend. Together, they were working on a project to record therapeutic music specifically designed for children in hospitals. The album would be distributed free to pediatric wards across the country, allowing Maria's healing music to reach children she might never meet in person, but perhaps the most meaningful change in Maria's life was the relationship she had developed with her patients. Working with sick children had taught her that healing was about much more than just medical treatment. It was about hope, connection, and finding moments of joy even in the midst of difficult circumstances. Her music provided a bridge between the clinical world of the hospital and the emotional needs of children who were scared, lonely, or in pain. As Maria finished her practice session and gathered her instruments for the afternoon's work, she thought about Lily waiting in her hospital room. The little girl didn't know it yet, but she was about to meet someone who understood what it felt like to be overlooked, someone who believed in the power of music to heal wounds that medicine alone couldn't touch. Maria's grandmother had always told her that good things come to those who work hard and never give up. But that night at the charity gala had taught her something even more important. Extraordinary things happen when talent meets opportunity. And when people choose to believe in each other's dreams, walking across campus toward the hospital, Maria's mind was already filled with melodies she wanted to share with Lily. She didn't know if today would be the day the little girl finally found her voice again, but she knew that music would give them a place to start. And sometimes that's all anyone needs, a place to start, a reason to hope, and someone who believes that every story can have a beautiful ending. The girl who had once served champagne to wealthy strangers was now using her gift to serve something much more precious, healing, hope, and the reminder that music really can change lives, one note at a time.